We are continuing on Mesechet Avodah Zarah, and we are on the bottom of Daf Nun Chet, Amud Bet, 4 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned. The Schud Rufa Shalamav Meir Ben Tova, Sarah Rachel Bat Nora, Hatzlacha Av Yigal Ben Devorah. Today's Amud is also being learned. The Schud Rufa Shalamav Av Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid should have full recovery. Amen. Now, we started a story with Resh Lakish, who visited a city called Batzra, which is really in Bavel, but he had mixed up Betzer in Eretz Yisrael with Batzra, so therefore he chastised the people in Batzra for not separating Terumot U'Masrot, and also he noticed that the Ovdei Kochavim in Batzra were actually serving the water of the rivers there, and Jews were drinking it, and he felt that that's also asur. The water becomes avodat kochavim, and he cannot have any hana'ah from it. So he came to Eretz Yisrael to Rabbi Yochanan, and he was all proud of the story that he had to tell him. And Rabbi Yochanan says, before you take your coat off, go back and retract your psakim, because you made 2 mistakes, 2 for 2. First of all, this is not Betzer, it's Botzra, it's in Bavel, and therefore they're not chayav betrumot u'masrot. And B, the goyim who bow to the water and serve the water, they cannot make the public domain asur. It's mayim shel rabim. It belongs to the community. And once it belongs to the community, they cannot make it asur by turning this into Avodah Zarah. I'm part of the community as a Jew. They cannot make it asur for me because it's everybody's. And en adam osir davar sheino shelo. So that's the beginning of this story that Rabbi Yochanan tells him, Amar le adem makturach alach. Once you have your coat on, zil, go back there, hadar, and reverse yourself, because Betzer lav hainu Botzra, last line, that Betzer and Botzra are 2 different cities, one in Eretz Yisrael and Botzra is in Bavel. Umayim shel rabim en nesarin. And you cannot aser up, you cannot prohibit a public domain that belongs to Rabim by serving the water as an Oved Avodah Zarah. Rabbi Yochanan letameh, and the Gemara explains now that this psak of Rabbi Yochanan about water not becoming asur is the shitato. As we studied this before, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehosadak. There are several places in Shas that seems like Rabbi Shimon ben Yehosadak was a Rebbe of Rabbi Yochanan. There's what to be said about that. But be that as it may, Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehosadak, Mayim shel Rabim ene esarin, that the water that belongs to the community does not become asur just because Paro decides to bow to Nilos, to the Nile River. You cannot make the whole river asur. Hadi yachid nesarin. Mara says, wait a second. This indicates that if the water would belong to a yachid, imagine if this is a spring of water that stems from the domain of one person. He has the field, and in his field there is a piping spring of water. So he owns the source of water, basically. So even though that afterwards he may go out of his domain, we spoke about this, details of this, how you have a Mayim Shel Yachid, and earlier on in Daf Mem Hey, in the Dapim that we did before. So says the Gemara, if the water would belong to Yachid, then you can make it Asur. But wait a second, the water is considered Mechubar Lekarka. The water is part of the world, and it's attached to the ground in that way. And we already darshined from a pasuk, Et Elohehem al ha'arim, that when you have the Avodah Zarah on top of the mountains, that they become asur. And we darshin et Elohehem al heharim velo heharim Elohehem. That the mountain itself, as much as people want to serve the mountain as a deity, the mountain never becomes asur. You could go break some rocks and use them in construction, gesundheit, no problem. Because something that's mechubar lekarka cannot become avodah zarah. That's what we darshin. So Gemara says, how do you have a mayim shel yachid, a river or a spring of water that belongs to yachid? How can he make the spring asur? It's mechubar lekarka. So says the Gemara, lo tzricha the talshin hu gala. We're talking about a very specific case, that there was a wave of water, and the water now is detached from the ground as it picks up in the air, and this entity right now is not mechubar lekarka. And if someone says, a powerful water, and he bows to it, it makes it an avodah zarah, that's what we're talking about. Says the Gemara, lo tzricha de talshin hu gala. The Gemara says, sof sof avnei har shenidaldelu ninhu. But this, at the end of the day, it was machloket amoraim that we learned priorly in the Gemara as well. The Gemara said, when you have a mountain and you have a piece of rock, piece of stone that automatically has detached from it, whether or not that could become avodah zarah or not. And there was machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and the sons of Rabbi Chia. Avnei har shenidaldelu ninhu tistayem de Rabbi Yochanan the Amar asurot. Over there, we didn't know who said what. It was machloket between Rabbi Yochanan himself and the sons of Rabbi Chia. One holding that's asur, one holding that's mutar. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If Rabbi Yochanan here told Resh Lakish that they can't make asur because it is Mayim shel Rabim, which indicates Mayim shel Yachid would be Asur. And now you're telling me Mayim shel Yachid would only be Asur when the wave kind of like came up and detached from the ground, which is equivalent of a rock that came separate from the mountain. So then I should be able to understand from here that earlier on in Gemara, when we had a machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and the sons of Rabbi Chia, who is the one that says they should be asur, the rock that's separated from the mountain? It should be Rabbi Yochanan, because here he's saying that the water, as a wave that would detach, would become asur if the goy would serve it. Should we say that? The Gemara says no. Lo tzricha de tafchinhu biyadeh. We're talking about a far more simple case over here. Talking about the case that the goy, hit the water up with his hand. So he actually did it with biyadayim. He did it manually, and that's when the water that was separated becomes asur in that case, and therefore it is nothing to do with that Gemara of Avnei Har that we had before. Fine. So that is the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, that he told Resh Lakish to go reverse himself in that case. Now another story. Rabbi Chia bar Abba ikla le Gavla. This is a very interesting one. Rabbi Chia bar Abba was visiting a city called Gavla, and he saw three strange things that were happening over there, and this time he learned from Resh Lakish not to say anything. He came back to Rabbi Yochanan just reporting what happened. And Rabbi Yochanan surprisingly tells him, you should have said is Asur. All three of them is Asur. So what did he see? Rabbi Chia bar Abba ikla le Gavla. He went to the city of Gavla. Chaza benot Yisrael me'abran me'ovdei kochavim. He saw Jewish girls that were pregnant from ovdei kochavim. But not regular ovdei kochavim. Shemalu velo tavlu. They were in the process of becoming gerim. They were not fully Jewish yet, because they may have accepted the mitzvot. The regular gerut, this is a whole sugya in Perek HaCholetz in Mesechet Yevamot, Daf Memhei, and on really for a number of blots in the Gemara there. what's the process of gerut? And generally speaking, we hold that you need kabbalat mitzvot. You have to accept the mitzvot. You have to also do milah v'tfilah. So these are goyim who had accepted the mitzvot. They had gone through brit milah, but they hadn't yet done their tfilah, their final process. Now there the Gemara has a machloket. What happens mal velo taval? And Rabbi Yochanan is the one that actually holds mal velo taval is no good. Not only that, Gemara goes as far as saying mal velo taval keilu lo mal. If you did milah and you haven't done tefillah, it's as if you did nothing. You have no level of Jewishness, so to speak, when you haven't completed your process of gerut. The truth of the matter is, there is fair amount of machloket whether a person that has accepted the mitzvot and has gone through brit milah should be keeping Shabbat or not. Because, a regular ger in process, nowadays it takes a long time for them to go through the process of learning and, adopting the minhagim and coming into the from community and, being basically adopted by a community, a Rav, friends, and so on. Takes 2 years, whatever it is. And we make sure to tell them to do Chilul Shabbat every Shabbat because Goy Shabbat Chayav Mitah. But really, after they accepted the mitzvot and they have done milah, before they heal from the surgery and do tefillah, whether or not they should be keeping Shabbat is a big machlokes. There's a story in Eretz Yisrael that happened with Rav Shmuel Salant and his successors, the Av Bedin over there, which became a whole tumult. But for all practical purposes, he is still a full-fledged goy. So says the Gemara, this was the first thing that Reb Chia Bar Abba saw in the city of Gavla. He saw Jewish women pregnant from these goyim who are towards the end of the process of gerut. What else did he see? He also saw what we just discussed in the Gemara of goyim who were pouring water to dilute the perfect mix of a wine. In other words, they were not touching the wine, but they were pouring water in the wine of a Jew, being mezigah. So we said before that was a whole machloket, and the Gemara said we don't want anything to do with that, even though that according to the Ramban and the Rashba that we brought yesterday, is really not even considered touching. Al yedei davar acher, it's not even kocho, it's not even your power, is far removed from that, but still we don't want to allow it because we tell, just like we tell a Nazir, go away and don't enter a vineyard, we also tell a goy, please do not have anything to do with our wine. We don't want you even to pour water inside. So that's the second thing he saw, that they were mekel, they were lenient to drink a wine that was diluted by a goy. And the third thing that he saw was Chazatul Musa, the shakleu of the Kochavim, V'ach Yisrael. He saw a certain food that was cooked by the Goyim and the Jews were eating it. So that sounds like Bishulakum. V'lo amar lehu v'lo midi. He was afraid to say anything. He came back and reported it to Rabbi Yochanan. Ata lekamed Rabbi Yochanan. He comes back to Rabbi Yochanan. Amale, and Rabbi Yochanan tells him, well, you messed up. You should have said all three of them are asur. And not only that, says Rabbi Yochanan to Rabbi Chia Bar Abba, go out and make a public announcement that the Jews in the city of Gavla, they have this issue of being pregnant from Ovet Kochavim Shemal V'lo Taval. Go announce that their kids are mamzerim. Right? Also announce that their wine is asur to be used zay nesech ve'al turmusan mishum bishulei oved kochavim, and say that the turmusim that are cooked by goyim are bishul akum is asur to eat because it's bishulei oved kochavim. And says Rabbi Yochanan, say that last thing because these people are not bnei Torah. In other words, so Rabbi Yochanan, it's not really bishul akum, but you should say that it's asur to eat it because these people are not bnei Torah. They're amaretz. They are ignorant people, and for ignoramus individual, if you let him have something that's cooked by a goy, which doesn't technically become bishulei akum, they will come to eat anything that's cooked by akum. So just go and across the board ban turmusim of the kochavim, even though that technically speaking it should be mutar. When you examine turmusim that are cooked by goyim, halachically speaking, it should be mutar, but you should go and prohibit it for them because they are ignorance. They're amaritz. And if you allow them to eat that, they will have steaks that are cooked from goyim as well, and we'll run into trouble. So let's examine in the Gemara all these three things that Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Chebarabba. Says the Gemara, first wide line.
Was this common, this idea of doing milah but no tevila? It was a tactic of the goyim not to convert?
No, not necessarily. This is a process. It could be by every ger, because what the Gemara and Rambam and Shulchan Aruch say in Siman Resh Lamechet in Yoreh De'ah is that you do the process of Kabbalat HaMitzvot, and then you do a milah, but you can't right away do tefillah because it's a surgical process, and it has to be at shitrape refuah shelema, says Rambam, says the Shulchan Aruch. Right? You wait for it until he has refuah shelema, not just refuah, but refuah shelema, because the water is bad for. Especially imagine back in the day when they didn't have chlorine in water of the mikveh, and also they didn't have antibiotics and creams and so on and so forth. If you had an open wound and you went to a regular body of water, which could have had just about anything in it, so it would be pashut dangerous. So therefore, Rambam says the Shulchan Aruch paskins that you have to wait after milah at sheyitraper refuah shelema. The question is, well, if you did that, and now you're waiting, I don't know how many days it is. It takes at least 7 days, right, for it to be mitraper refuah shelema, say the poskim. So let's imagine that it was procrastinated, and now in this middle thing, he fathered a child. So he didn't go, he forgot, he didn't go, the betir was not available, whatever it is, because again, tefillah has to be in front of dayanim, it has to be in front of, well, yes, it has to be in front of shlosha, right? Whether for Kabbalat HaMitzvot or for the tefillah itself, also being a process of gerut. But be that as it may, it needs to be in front. So you have to schedule, and you know how things work. So it could be in a regular, very innocent case, but these people were not careful. This is so why he accepted the mitzvot, he got the brit milah, But Gemara says, as Rabbi Yochanan is going to explain right now, that mal velo taval kilu lo mal. It's nothing. You're a full-fledged akum still until you finish the process. So says the Gemara, Al benehem shehem mamzerin. Why do you have to say that the children of these people in city of Gavla are mamzerim? Rabbi Yochanan letameh. Rabbi Yochanan is consistent with his psak. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, that we know Rabbi Yochanan paskin in Mesechet Yevamot, in Perek HaCholetz that we discussed in Daf Memvav Amud Aleph, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan leolam eno ger ad sheyimol veyitbor, that he is not considered a ger at all. There's no halfway. It's zero until he has done Kabbalat HaMitzvot, he has done milah, and he has done tefillah. And therefore, Rekevan de lo tavil, once he has not dunk for tefillah, Oved Kochavim, who is still considered Oved Kochavim, ve'amar Rabba Yochanan, Oved Kochavim ve'eved, Habal Bat Yisrael, Havelad Mamzer. This is again another machloket that really goes to be a machloket Tanaim, but Rabbi Yochanan's psak is that a goy that fathers a child with a Jewish girl, the child is a mamzer. It's machloket if it's kasher or if it's mamzer, and even if it's kasher, it's a whole machloket what exactly kasher mean. We paskin that havelad is kasher, the velad is kasher, but even within that, it's machloket in the Tosafot, in Mesechet Kiddushin, towards the end of Mesechet Kiddushin, there's a long Tosafot that seems to indicate, at least according to the way Maharsha there understands it, this is a famous shita that has been discussed in Even Ha'ezer, in Siman Dalet, in the beginning of Even Ha'ezer, that maybe the Vlad is mamzer, but it's a mamzer that could be fixed. Normally speaking, a mamzer cannot be fixed. If you're born a mamzer, you'll die a mamzer, and that's about it. So that becomes a little bit more complex, beyond the pay grade of this shiur and beyond the scope of this shiur. But nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion in that machloket that Eved and Oved Kochavim, that father a child with a Jewish girl, the child is a mamzer. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan is very much aligned with his own shita of two things combined together. A goy in process of gerut is gornish geven. If he has even done Kabbalat mitzvot and he has done tvilah and milah rather, but has not dunked in the mikveh, it's nothing. It's not considered. So therefore, he's a full-fledged certified akum still, and therefore, if he fathers a child with mother and its nisog is attached, it's considered that you are moving the wine. Al yedeh davarach, it's kocho, it's your power that's moving it indirectly, and therefore it should be mutar. But as we said in the Gemara before, this is equivalent of lech amrinan nezira schor schor lekarma lo tikrav. It's the same halacha that we make a fence around the whole thing, just like by Nazir, we tell a Nazir, lech, go away from a vineyard, even though that poor guy, he should just stay away from wine and grapes and stuff that relate to that. He could walk and enjoy a vineyard, but we tell him, no. Le karma lo tigrav, go around a kerem, go around a vineyard, because we don't want you to have anything to do with kerem, lest you come to drink wine or have grapes. Here also, even though that technically speaking would not be yain nesich, we tell them that this is yain nesich because we don't want the goy to have anything to do with the wine. So says the Gemara, how about the turmus? The turmus business. V'al turmusan mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim, lefi she'enan bnei Torah. Rabbi Yochanan said the turmusin really is mutar, but say it's asur anyways because they're ignorant and they're not going to be able to differentiate between this and a steak. So therefore, just prohibit it for them. So it says, wait a second. You're telling me that the reason is because they are not bnei Torah, which indicates that turmusin are really mutar. It's not bishulei of the kochavim, right? Why? I thought, says the Gemara, ha bnei Torah shari, for bnei Torah would be mutar. If they were learned people, it would be mutar. V'hamar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak amar Rav. We learned previously, right, in Daf Lamed, starting from Lamed Hey, but really in Daf Lamed Chet, we learned in the Mishnah and the Gemara over there that kol shene'echal kemo shu chai en bo mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim. Anything that's edible raw is not included in bishul akum. And turmusim are not edible raw. Absolutely not. Actually, turmusim, you have to see from other places in Shas, you have to cook them 7 times. So they're like the pinnacle of not edible raw. So of course it should be asur if it's not edible raw. So says Gemara, correct, but Rabbi Yochanan, if you remember, in that same Gemara, and Lamed Chet Amud Aleph, earlier on, we learned that there are 2 things that you need, 2 criteria. A, it should not be nechal kemo shu chai, and B, it has to be ole al shulchan melachim. Remember that? It has to be an important chashuv v'meichel. It has to be important food. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan holds like the other one, Ki hachlish nasvira ledamar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Rav kol she'enu ola l'shulchan melachim lelafet bo et hapat en bo mishum bishvilo uvdei kochavim. Anything that's not important that would go on an important meal would not be considered ola shulchan melachim, and therefore turmusim, which are very peasants' food, is not something important, would not be in category. It's not in the category of food that would become asur. But again, because they're not b'nei Torah, because they're ignorant, you should say it's asur. Tama de'enan b'nei Torah, ha b'nei Torah shari. So that would be really the reason of the 3 psakim that Rabbi Yochanan gave. Now we're going to discuss a fascinating discussion of goyim helping out in business of wine with the Jews, and then followed by several very interesting stories in the Gemara, which will continue in the days to come.